Cowboy, don't look, my dress is gone," whispered the Apache woman behind the waterfall. Jacob had been riding for hours, the sun high above the desert sky, burning down on the rocky canyons that stretched endlessly around him. His horse, a sturdy brown mare named Daisy, was tired, but she trusted Jacob's hands and kept a steady pace. The cowboy had been chasing a stray herd for 2 days, trying to bring the lost cattle back to the ranch. He was tall and lean, with a dusty hat that shaded his sharp eyes and a bandana around his neck to keep the hot wind and dirt out of his mouth. Every few minutes he scanned the horizon, looking for the telltale movement of the herd or the faint footprints of the wandering cattle. The desert was silent except for the distant cry of a hawk circling high above and the occasional rustle of dry brush under Daisy's hooves. Jacob's thoughts wandered, thinking of home, the small ranch, the old wooden fence that needed fixing, and the warm stew that awaited him after a long day. But the loneliness of the trail pressed on him. Riding alone in the vast wilderness could make even the toughest men uneasy, and Jacob knew better than to underestimate the desert. Strange noises, sudden movements, or shadows could all hide danger. As the afternoon grew hotter, he noticed a glimmer in the distance, like sunlight reflecting off something wet. Curious, he guided Daisy toward it, stepping carefully over jagged rocks and loose sand. The closer he got, the clearer the sight became. It was a waterfall, small but beautiful, tucked between 2 high cliffs, with water tumbling down into a pool below. The sound of the water was calming even in the harsh desert heat, and Jacob felt a rare sense of relief wash over him. It was a perfect place to rest, and maybe even find a bit of shade. As he approached the waterfall, he noticed movement. Something, or someone, was there. Hidden behind the curtain of water was the faint shape of a person. Jacob slowed Daisy to a stop, squinting to get a better look. It was a young woman, and she seemed unaware of his presence. Her long dark hair clung to her shoulders as she moved gracefully among the rocks and the water. Jacob's first instinct was to turn away. He had been raised to respect the privacy of others, especially in moments like this. But he was also a curious man, and the sight was mesmerizing. He reminded himself to stay still, not to make a sound, and certainly not to stare. The woman noticed him at the same moment. Her eyes widened in fear, and she quickly moved behind the waterfall, trying to hide. Jacob realized that he had stumbled into something private, something personal, and he felt a wave of guilt. He raised a hand slowly, signaling that he meant no harm. "I didn't mean to intrude," he called softly, his voice barely rising above the roar of the water. "I'll leave right away." But the woman's voice, soft and trembling, came back through the mist. "Cowboy, don't look, my dress is gone," she whispered, her words filled with a mixture of fear and frustration. Jacob froze. He understood immediately the seriousness of the situation. She was vulnerable, exposed, and frightened. Jacob felt a surge of protectiveness mixed with respect. He turned his head to the side, focusing on the rocks instead of her, showing that he would not take advantage of the moment. The woman, whose name Jacob would soon learn was Naeli, peeked out from behind the waterfall cautiously. She was an Apache, young and strong, with eyes that reflected both fear and determination. She had grown up learning the ways of the land, how to track animals, find food and water, and survive in the wilderness. Her people had taught her the importance of being cautious around strangers, especially cowboys who often misunderstood or mistreated Native Americans. Naeli's heart raced, but she also noticed something in Jacob's behavior that was different. He did not advance, did not make sudden movements, and had turned away to give her privacy. Jacob dismounted Daisy and led her a few steps back, giving Naeli more space. "I promise I mean no harm," he said again, his voice calm and sincere. "I'm just looking for a lost herd. I didn't know anyone was here." He did not try to peek or speak any more than necessary. The desert had taught him patience, and he knew that trust could not be forced. It had to be earned. For a few moments there was silence except for the rushing water. Naeli's mind raced. She considered running, disappearing into the trees and rocks where Jacob could not follow. But something in his calm voice and gentle posture made her pause. She had seen cowboys before, some cruel and thoughtless, some dangerous. But this one seemed different. There was respect in the way he kept his distance, in the way he spoke without raising his voice. Slowly, Nayeli stepped out from behind the waterfall, wrapping a towel around her shoulders to cover herself. Jacob did not look directly at her, keeping his gaze on the rocks near his feet. He offered a hand to Daisy, patting her gently to keep her calm as well. "I'll wait here until you're ready," he said quietly. "No rush." The desert sun began to lower, casting golden light on the waterfall and the rocks around them. The water sparkled like tiny diamonds, and the air smelled faintly of wet stone and wildflowers. Jacob took in the beauty of the moment, realizing that sometimes the world could be harsh and lonely, but it could also surprise him with small pockets of peace and wonder. Nayeli, meanwhile, watched him carefully, still cautious but beginning to feel that perhaps not all strangers were dangerous. Minutes passed and the tension began to ease. Nayeli finally spoke, her voice steadier now. "You are not like the others," she said. "You do not look at me like I am something to be taken." Jacob nodded, acknowledging her words without pride or arrogance. "I was raised to respect people," he said simply. "No one should be made to feel afraid because of who they are." The two stood in silence for a while, listening to the waterfall and feeling the cool mist on their skin. Jacob thought about the herd he had come to find, but for a moment, that seemed less important. This encounter was unexpected, unplanned, and yet somehow meaningful. Nayeli considered what had just happened and realized that not every encounter with a stranger had to end in fear or conflict. As the sun dipped lower, Jacob knew he should continue his journey. He had responsibilities waiting, and Daisy needed to rest. But he felt a strange pull to linger, to somehow honor this moment of trust that had formed so suddenly. Nayeli gave him a small nod, signaling that she understood he would leave, but that their brief meeting mattered. Jacob mounted Daisy slowly, careful not to rush, and turned away from the waterfall. He kept his promise, never glancing back at Nayeli, though the image of her strength and caution stayed in his mind. Nayeli watched him ride off, feeling a mixture of relief and curiosity. She had seen kindness where she least expected it, and it gave her hope that the world outside her small community could sometimes surprise her. As Jacob disappeared over the canyon ridge, the desert returned to its quiet state. The waterfall continued to tumble, the rocks shimmered in the fading sunlight, and Nayeli knew that she would remember this day forever. A day when caution and respect met, and two very different lives crossed paths in the heart of the wilderness. After the waterfall encounter, Jacob could not shake the image of the young Apache woman from his mind. Her cautious eyes, the way she had protected herself, and the quiet strength she had shown lingered like a shadow over his thoughts. He urged Daisy to pick up her pace, but even as they moved, he found himself glancing at the cliffs and the small ravines, imagining where she might have disappeared. The desert stretched endlessly before him, but now it seemed less empty, filled instead with the memory of someone who had unexpectedly entered his life. Jacob's mind wandered back to the herd he had been tracking for days. The lost cattle had been scattered across miles of rocky terrain, and finding them had proven difficult. Some of the cows had wandered toward the canyon edges, others had gone near the dry riverbeds. Normally he would have been focused entirely on the work ahead, but the memory of Nayeli made him think differently about the land he traveled. He realized that this was not just a place to chase cattle. It was alive, filled with people, animals, and moments that could change the course of a day, or even a life. Meanwhile, Nayeli moved through the hidden paths behind the waterfall, her bare feet careful on the wet stones. Her heart still raced from the encounter, but her mind began to reflect on what had happened. She had grown up learning that cowboys were often careless or cruel, intruding into native lands without respect. Yet this man had acted differently. He had turned away, given her privacy, and spoken without anger or judgment. Nayeli wondered if all people outside her community could be this considerate, or if Jacob was simply an exception, a rare human being who did not conform to the harsh reputation of outsiders. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Nayeli knew she could not linger near the waterfall for too long. The canyon was beautiful, but danger always lurked nearby. Predators, unexpected visitors, or even treacherous footing could turn a moment of peace into disaster. She quickly dried herself and returned her dress, feeling the fabric cling to her skin after being soaked by the waterfall. Even though she felt exposed earlier, she had also discovered something new, the feeling that not every encounter with a stranger ended in fear. For the first time in a long while, Nayeli allowed herself a small, quiet smile. Jacob had stopped near a small ridge, where he could survey the canyon below. He scanned the ground carefully, trying to pick up fresh tracks of the herd. He noticed hoofprints, some recent and some older, leading in various directions. The work required focus, patience, and careful observation. As he studied the tracks, he thought about the Apache woman again. There was something remarkable about her. Her courage, her alertness, and the way she had handled the unexpected moment without panic. Jacob realized that in the vast desert, people like her were rare. They were survivors, shaped by the land and the challenges of life in ways that few outsiders could ever understand. As the hours passed, Jacob and Daisy navigated narrow trails, crossed dry creek beds, and climbed over rocky hills. Each step brought new challenges, but Jacob remained focused. He adjusted his hat to shield his eyes from the low sun and listened carefully to the sounds of the desert, the rustle of small animals, the distant cry of birds, and the whisper of the wind through the canyon walls. Every sound reminded him that the desert was alive, full of unseen movements and hidden stories. He thought about how he had stumbled into one of those stories earlier, meeting Nayeli by the waterfall. It felt like a reminder that the world had surprises for those who kept their eyes and hearts open. Meanwhile, Nayeli returned to her small village at the edge of the canyon. Her people were wary of outsiders, and she had been taught to protect herself and her family from strangers. But today she had learned that there were moments when caution and trust could coexist. She recounted the encounter in her mind, not sharing it with anyone yet, because she needed to understand it herself. Nayeli realized that the desert was not just a place of survival. It was a place of learning, of meeting others, and of discovering unexpected kindness. That evening, Jacob made camp near a small clearing, the firelight flickering against the rocks. He untied Daisy, letting her graze on sparse patches of grass while he tended to his own needs. The sky turned deep orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear. Jacob felt a sense of calm despite the long day, the loneliness of the desert softened by the memory of Nayeli. He spoke quietly to himself, more as a way to organize his thoughts than to truly converse. "She's strong," he murmured, "and brave. I hope she stays safe." As night fell, the desert came alive with new sounds, the chirping of crickets, the distant howl of a coyote, and the rustling of leaves in the gentle night wind. Jacob lay back on a bedroll, staring up at the stars, thinking about the strange and unexpected moments that life sometimes presented. The encounter at the waterfall had been brief, yet it had left an impression on him. He realized that in his life of routines and work, such moments were rare, precious, and unforgettable. Nayeli, on the other hand, sat near the edge of the village, watching the sky turn dark. She thought about the cowboy and his respect for her privacy. She had expected fear, danger, or at least suspicion, but instead she had found a quiet understanding. She remembered the way he had spoken, the way he had averted his gaze, and the way he had averted patiently. Nayeli understood that not all outsiders were the same, and perhaps some could be allies, or at least people who would not cause harm. The next morning Jacob rose early, the first light of dawn breaking across the canyon. He prepared to continue his search for the herd, but the memory of the waterfall lingered like a gentle shadow. As he guided Daisy along the narrow paths, he thought about how quickly life could change, how a simple encounter could leave a lasting impression. Jacob realized that he would likely never see Nayeli again, but the lessons of respect, patience, and understanding would stay with him for the rest of his days. Meanwhile, Nayeli prepared for her own day, gathering water and food for her family while keeping a watchful eye on the land. She thought about the cowboy, his calm demeanor, and his respect. She realized that the desert, with all its challenges, also held moments of unexpected beauty and kindness. Nayeli knew that the story of the waterfall would remain with her, a memory of a moment when two very different people had met, understood each other, and parted without harm. As the sun rose higher in the sky, both Jacob and Naeli went about their separate paths, unaware of how their lives might intersect again. Yet the memory of their encounter remained alive in both hearts, a reminder that even in the vast and often harsh desert, moments of trust and understanding could shine like stars, guiding them through the challenges of the day. Throughout the day, Jacob carefully tracked the hoofprints of the herd, moving through valleys, climbing ridges and crossing shallow streams. Each movement required attention and skill, yet he remained mindful of the lessons he had learned the previous day. Respect for the land, patience, and observation were not just necessary for survival. They were essential for understanding the people and creatures who live there as well. Naeli continued her work in the village, helping her family, tending to small tasks, and keeping watch over the surrounding land. The encounter at the waterfall had given her a new perspective, teaching her that caution and trust could coexist. She felt a sense of calm she had not experienced before, a quiet confidence that she could navigate the world safely while still being open to unexpected kindness. By evening, both Jacob and Naeli had completed their day, reflecting on the moments that had shaped them. The waterfall, the encounter, and the brief but meaningful connection lingered in their minds. It was a reminder that even in the vast, lonely desert, moments of humanity, respect, and understanding could exist. And sometimes, the smallest encounters could leave the biggest impact, shaping the way a person viewed the world and the people in it. The next morning, the desert greeted Jacob with the same dry, hot air that seemed to cling to every surface. The sky was a pale blue, almost white from the heat, and the rocks glowed softly in the early sunlight. Jacob adjusted his hat, wiped the sweat from his brow, and checked Daisy's harness before leading her down a narrow canyon path. He was determined to find the scattered herd, but the encounter at the waterfall remained fresh in his mind. He had seen courage, strength, and fear all in the same moment, and it reminded him that life in this land was never simple. As Jacob moved through the canyon, he noticed fresh tracks in the soft dirt, a few hoofprints leading toward a narrow ravine. He followed them carefully, mindful of the rocky ground that could shift under Daisy's hooves. Every step required attention. But he also allowed his mind to wander back to the Apache woman. Her calm strength and cautious eyes had made an impression on him that he could not shake. In a place where danger was always near, her composure was remarkable. Meanwhile, Naeli awoke before sunrise, the chill of the morning brushing against her skin. She had spent the night thinking about the cowboy, the waterfall, and the way he had acted. Normally, encounters with outsiders made her wary, but Jacob had been different. She remembered the way he had turned away, giving her privacy, and the gentleness in his voice. Naeli knew she could not let herself be caught off guard again, but she also realized that her world was not entirely made of fear and suspicion. Sometimes, trust could grow, even in the harshest places. As the day progressed, Jacob tracked the herd through narrow canyon trails, over rocky ridges, and across dry riverbeds. The desert was alive with sounds, the distant call of birds, the rustle of small animals, and the whisper of the wind against the rocks. Jacob relied on his senses and experience, carefully observing every detail to avoid startling the herd. At the same time, he kept thinking about Naeli. He wondered what her life was like, what she thought about when she walked these canyons alone, and how she had learned to navigate a world that could be dangerous for anyone living outside a town or settlement. Naeli, on her part, went about her daily routine, gathering water from a nearby spring and tending to her family's small garden. Her movements were precise and efficient, a result of years of learning to survive and thrive in the wilderness. Yet her thoughts often drifted back to Jacob. She did not know his name, nor did she know much about him, but the memory of the waterfall and his respectful behavior lingered. It was rare to encounter someone who did not treat her as a stranger, a curiosity, or a threat. This small, unexpected kindness gave her hope that the world could hold more than danger and fear. By late morning, Jacob had followed the herd's tracks to a wide, open plain. The cattle were scattered, some grazing near small shrubs, others wandering closer to a dry riverbed. Jacob dismounted Daisy and approached carefully, using his knowledge of animal behavior to avoid startling them. He moved slowly, speaking softly, encouraging the cows to gather. It was meticulous work, requiring patience and focus. But Jacob had learned long ago that rushing would only create chaos. As Jacob worked to gather the herd, Naeli moved silently along the edge of the canyon. She had ventured further from her village, scouting for edible plants and fresh water sources. Her sharp eyes noticed signs of movement, broken twigs, footprints in the dirt, and shadows shifting among the rocks. She sensed that someone had passed through recently. It was not unusual for travelers to move through the desert, but something made her pause. She felt a strange familiarity in the tracks, a sense that the person had a gentle presence. Her heart quickened, and she moved closer to investigate, careful to stay hidden. Jacob had finished rounding up most of the herd when he heard the faint rustle of footsteps in the brush behind him. He turned slightly, scanning the edges of the plain. For a moment he thought it might be a wild animal, but then he caught a glimpse of a figure moving carefully among the rocks. His heart skipped a beat as he realized it was Naeli. She had followed the same path he had taken, moving quietly but deliberately, keeping to the shadows. Jacob's respect for her grew even more. She was cautious, brave, and aware of her surroundings in a way that few people were. Naeli's eyes met Jacob's briefly, and she froze. For a moment there was silence between them, filled only by the sounds of the plain, the low mooing of the cattle, the wind rustling through the sparse vegetation, and the distant cry of a hawk. Neither moved immediately, each waiting to see what the other would do. Finally, Jacob spoke softly, careful not to startle her. "I'm not here to harm you," he said. "The herd is my concern. You don't need to worry." Naeli relaxed slightly but did not step forward. She remembered the lessons of her people, to trust actions over words, and to be cautious with strangers. Yet she also recognized that Jacob's presence felt different this time. He had not intruded, he had not rushed, and he had given her space. Slowly, she moved a few steps closer, still keeping a safe distance. Jacob returned to the herd, making sure each cow was in the right place, but his mind remained alert to Naeli's presence. He realized that this encounter required the same patience and respect as gathering the cattle. One wrong move, one careless word, could destroy the fragile trust between them. So he worked carefully, speaking softly when necessary, and keeping his movements slow and deliberate. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, the heat of the desert became more intense. Jacob and Naeli both felt the strain of the day. Jacob offered some water to Daisy, and she drank eagerly, her large brown eyes reflecting the sun. Naeli found a shaded spot near a rock outcrop and rested for a moment, drinking from a small flask of water she had carried from the spring. Both were aware of the dangers of the desert, the heat, the uneven terrain, and the unpredictable animals, but they also understood the importance of moving with care and attention. During this time, Jacob and Naeli began to communicate more, though still cautiously. Their words were few, but they exchanged understanding and respect through gestures, nods, and careful observation. Each recognized the other's skill and awareness of the land. Jacob admired Naeli's knowledge of the plants, water sources, and hidden paths. Naeli, in turn, appreciated Jacob's patience, his careful handling of the cattle, and the way he navigated the desert without disturbing its natural balance. As the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the plain, a sudden sound startled them both, a rock slide in the nearby canyon, sending stones tumbling down the slope. Jacob reacted immediately, moving to shield Daisy and calling to Naeli to move to safety. Naeli's instincts kicked in as well, and she darted to a safer spot behind a large boulder. The rocks crashed down, narrowly missing both of them, and the dust filled the air. When it was over, Jacob and Naeli looked at each other, hearts pounding, and realized how close they had come to danger. This shared experience shifted something between them. The tension of caution gave way to a mutual understanding, a recognition that they had relied on each other, even briefly, to avoid harm. Jacob nodded at Naeli, a silent acknowledgement of her quick thinking and courage. Naeli returned the gesture, a small smile breaking through her usually guarded expression. The desert had tested them, and they had both passed the challenge by observing, respecting, and acting wisely. By evening, the herd was mostly gathered, and Jacob led them toward a safer valley where they could rest for the night. Naeli accompanied him for a short distance, moving carefully beside the rocks, ensuring that she remained unseen by any potential dangers, but still close enough to observe. Both had learned from the day's events, realizing that survival in the desert required not only skill, but trust, awareness, and sometimes cooperation with those one might least expect. As night fell, Jacob made camp in a small clearing, the firelight flickering and casting soft shadows on the surrounding rocks. He tended to Daisy and the herd, ensuring that the animals were calm and secure. Naeli found a safe spot nearby, hidden among the rocks, where she could rest while keeping watch over the surrounding area. Though they were apart, both felt a quiet connection, a sense that they had shared something meaningful that went beyond words. The stars appeared in the clear desert sky, twinkling above the vast expanse of rocks and canyons. Jacob and Naeli each reflected on the day's events, understanding that the desert was more than just a harsh, empty land. It was alive with challenges, lessons, and unexpected moments of trust and courage. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and their own fears, and in doing so, they had discovered a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. Jacob thought about the herd he had been tracking, but now he realized that the most valuable lesson of the day was not about cattle. It was about respect, patience, and the unexpected connections that life could offer. Naeli, too, understood that the world outside her village could hold moments of kindness and understanding, even from someone she might have expected to fear. As the night deepened, the desert grew quiet, filled only with the soft sounds of the wind, distant animals, and the gentle murmur of the fire. Jacob and Naeli rested, each aware of the other's presence without needing words, their shared experiences leaving a lasting impression. They had survived the day together, learned from one another, and found respect and understanding in a land that often demanded vigilance and caution. The next morning, the desert air was cool and crisp, a gentle contrast to the intense heat of the previous day. Jacob awoke before sunrise, the soft pink and orange light stretching across the canyon walls. He stretched his arms, feeling the stiffness from yesterday's long hours of tracking the herd. Daisy nickered softly, ready to start another day. Jacob fed her a small portion of oats and patted her neck, whispering, "Let's see if we can get this done today, girl." The herd still needed to be gathered completely, and he knew the desert offered no shortcuts. Every rock, every canyon turn could hide obstacles, and patience would be the key. Naeli had also risen early, her body used to moving with the first light. She carried a small water flask and carefully made her way through the canyon's rocky paths, scouting for fresh herbs and water sources. Despite the beauty of the desert at dawn, her mind was alert. Danger could appear suddenly. Slippery rocks, wild animals, or even travelers who did not understand her presence. She remembered the cowboy Jacob from the day before. Something about him had stayed in her mind. His calm demeanor, his patience, and the respect he had shown made her think differently about the outside world. As the sun rose higher, Jacob led Daisy and the herd along a narrow path that wound between steep canyon walls. The terrain was challenging. Loose rocks shifted underfoot, and the steep edges demanded careful navigation. Jacob moved slowly, guiding the cattle while keeping his eyes on the surrounding cliffs. Every step required focus. He could not afford to be careless. Not for the herd, not for Daisy, and not for himself. The desert did not forgive mistakes. Naeli, meanwhile, had moved closer to the herd's path, hiding behind large boulders as she watched the cowboy work. She wanted to understand more about him, this man who had shown respect and care in a world that often ignored or mistreated people like her. She observed Jacob's movements with sharp attention. He spoke softly to the animals, guiding them gently rather than forcing them. His actions showed patience and skill, qualities that Naeli respected deeply. Suddenly a sound echoed through the canyon, a loud crack followed by the rumble of falling rocks. Both Jacob and Naeli froze. A small rock slide had been triggered somewhere above, and stones tumbled down, bouncing off cliffs and crashing near the herd. Jacob reacted instinctively, shielding Daisy and calling out to the cattle to stay calm. Naeli's heart raced as she leapt behind a boulder, careful not to be seen by the falling rocks. The dust filled the air and the noise was deafening. When the rocks finally settled, Jacob quickly checked the herd, Most of the cattle had remained calm, but a few had scattered. He knew he needed to act fast to prevent them from running further into dangerous terrain. With steady, commanding movements, he guided them toward a safer part of the canyon, speaking softly and gently nudging them along. His skill and experience were evident. Every decision mattered. Every second counted. Nayeli watched silently, her eyes wide. She admired Jacob's bravery and ability to stay calm under pressure. Yet her mind also raced with fear. The desert was unpredictable, and this rock slide was a reminder that danger could strike without warning. She realized that her respect for Jacob was growing, not just for the man, but for his understanding of the desert and the life it demanded. As the day continued, the herd moved through a narrow pass. Jacob carefully led them along a trail with steep cliffs on one side and loose rocks on the other. The sun climbed high, making the rocks hot to the touch and the air heavy. Sweat ran down Jacob's face, and he wiped it with the back of his hand. Daisy's hooves slipped slightly on the uneven path, but Jacob's steady hands guided her safely. The herd followed closely, trusting his experience. Nayeli decided to follow from a safe distance, moving quietly among the rocks and keeping her presence hidden. She was learning more about Jacob's ways, the patience, the observation, and the careful communication with the animals. Every movement he made had purpose. Every word he spoke was measured. Nayeli felt a mix of admiration and curiosity. She had never met someone so skilled in understanding both the land and the creatures that lived in it. As they approached a wide canyon opening, Jacob noticed fresh tracks leading toward the cliff edge. His heart skipped a beat. If the cattle moved too close to the edge, disaster could strike. He urged the herd carefully, using soft claps and gentle taps with his rope to guide them toward safer ground. The tension was high. One wrong move could result in serious injury or loss of cattle. Jacob focused entirely on the task, his entire being tuned to the sounds, movements, and energy of the canyon. Nayeli, observing from a hidden vantage point, felt a sudden pang of concern. She realized that the cowboy had no idea she was nearby. Yet she also understood that intervening could be dangerous. She watched carefully, ready to help if something went wrong, but also trusting that Jacob could handle the situation with the skill she had seen before. Her admiration grew, and she realized that sometimes courage came not just from strength, but from calmness and careful action. Just as the herd reached safer ground, a loud noise erupted from the canyon behind them. A sudden gust of wind dislodged more rocks from the cliffs above. Jacob's eyes widened as he quickly assessed the danger. He guided Daisy and the cattle away from the cliff's edge, moving them to a small, flat plateau. The wind whipped dust and pebbles around them, making it difficult to see. Jacob's quick thinking saved the herd from potential disaster. Nayeli felt her heart race as she watched. She had learned the importance of patience and observation, and she realized that Jacob embodied those qualities in the most extraordinary way. His calm response, his skill, and his respect for the animals and the land impressed her deeply. For the first time, she felt a sense of connection, not just with Jacob, but with someone who truly understood the balance between caution and action.
As the dust settled, Jacob and Nayeli finally met in person again, this time in a safer spot.
They exchanged a brief look, a silent acknowledgement of the day's events. No words were needed. The shared experience of danger and survival had created a bond, fragile, but real. Jacob nodded to Nayeli, and she returned the gesture. Both understood that respect and trust were growing between them, even in a world filled with unpredictability. The sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the canyon. Jacob made camp near a small pool of water, ensuring the herd was safe and calm. Daisy drank eagerly while Jacob tended to the animals. Nayeli found a shaded spot nearby, watching quietly, still cautious but more confident than before. The day's events had tested both of them, showing how skill, patience, and calmness could overcome fear and danger. That night, under the star-filled sky, Jacob and Nayeli reflected on the day's challenges.
The rock slides and wind had reminded them both of the desert's power, its unpredictability, and the need for respect and vigilance.
Yet they also felt the quiet pride of having faced these dangers and survived through careful observation and cooperation. Though their worlds were different, they had learned to rely on each other in ways that neither had expected. Jacob thought about the herd and the canyon, but his mind kept returning to Nayeli. He admired her bravery and intelligence, and he realized that his respect for her extended beyond her actions. It included her character, her wisdom, and her understanding of the land. Nayeli in turn thought about Jacob's patience, skill, and calmness under pressure. She had learned that courage was not always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it was quiet, deliberate, and careful. The night grew quiet, the only sounds being the soft breeze and the distant calls of desert animals. Jacob and Nayeli rested, aware of each other's presence but giving space. The shared experiences of the day had created a bond built on trust, respect, and understanding. Both knew that the desert would continue to challenge them, but they also knew that they were stronger for having faced these challenges together. By the time dawn approached again, the canyon was calm. The herd rested, Daisy ate quietly, and Jacob prepared for another day of tracking and guiding. Nayeli, observing from a distance, felt a sense of reassurance. The desert was still a place of unpredictability, but moments like these, moments of courage, patience, and respect, reminded her of the good that could exist even in the harshest places. The breaking moment of the day had tested both of them. Danger had come suddenly without warning, but their calmness, respect, and careful actions had allowed them to survive and protect the herd. The desert had shown them its power, but it had also shown them their own resilience, skill, and understanding. And as they rested that night, both Jacob and Nayeli knew that this moment would remain in their memories forever, a moment of challenge, growth, and mutual respect that could not be forgotten. The next morning, the desert air was cool, tinged with the faint scent of wildflowers and wet stone from the previous night's dew. Jacob rose early, his mind focused yet calm. The herd had spent the night in a safe, flat area, and Daisy was rested and ready for the journey ahead. He gave her a gentle pat and whispered, "Let's finish this, girl. Just a little further." Though he had accomplished much over the past days, he knew that every day in the desert could bring new challenges, and patience remained his most important tool. Meanwhile, Nayeli observed from a distance, hidden among rocks and shrubs that gave her a clear view of the herd and the cowboy. She had spent the previous night reflecting on everything that had happened: the waterfall, the rock slides, the careful guidance of the cattle, and the calmness that Jacob had shown even when danger threatened. She had realized something important. The world outside her village, though often unpredictable, was not always filled with fear. There were people who acted with respect, patience, and understanding, and she had met one of them. Jacob led the herd carefully along a winding trail that snaked through the canyon. Each step was deliberate, his eyes scanning the path ahead for loose rocks or sudden drops. He whispered softly to the cattle, using gestures to guide them without causing panic. Daisy followed faithfully, trusting his calm commands. Jacob's skill and patience ensured that the herd remained together, even as the canyon narrowed and the terrain grew more difficult. He moved like a part of the land itself, attuned to the rocks, the dirt, and the subtle movements of the animals. Nayeli followed quietly from a safe distance. She admired the cowboy's ability to read the land and the herd, and she realized that true skill came from observation, understanding, and patience, not from force or noise. She moved carefully, ensuring that she stayed hidden while still observing Jacob's methods. The lesson she had learned over the years from her people about reading tracks, predicting animal behavior, and navigating the desert helped her understand Jacob's actions on a deeper level. She felt respect growing in her heart, not just for his abilities, but for the calm and careful way he treated the world around him. By mid-morning, they reached a small oasis tucked between two cliffs. A gentle stream flowed through it, and a few patches of green grass offered a place for the cattle to rest and drink. Jacob guided the herd into the clearing, allowing them to drink and graze while he checked for signs of injury or stress. Daisy drank eagerly, and the herd appeared calmer in the safety of the oasis. Jacob took a moment to rest himself, leaning against a rock and wiping sweat from his brow. He felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a quiet reflection on the lessons of the desert, the way it tested patience, courage, and understanding. Nayeli emerged from her hiding spot, careful to stay at the edge of the oasis. She watched Jacob work with the herd, noticing the gentle but firm way he handled the cattle. She realized that skill alone was not enough. It was his respect for the animals, for the land, and for the challenges of the desert that made him truly remarkable. Slowly, she stepped closer, feeling a sense of trust that had grown over the past days. She did not approach directly, but her presence was no longer hidden. Jacob noticed her movement and looked up. Their eyes met, and for a moment, there was silence. No words were needed. The shared experiences of the past days, the waterfall, the rock slides, the careful guidance of the herd, had created a connection built on respect, trust, and understanding. Jacob nodded slightly, a small gesture acknowledging her presence without breaking the calm of the moment. Naeli returned the nod, a quiet smile forming on her face. They understood each other without speaking, recognizing the courage, patience, and humanity in one another. As the day wore on, Jacob prepared to guide the herd to the next safe area. He spoke softly to Naeli, careful not to startle her. "I need to move the herd a little further," he said. "It's safer for them on more level ground." Naeli nodded, understanding the importance of his task. Though she could have offered to help, she knew that Jacob's skill and experience were unmatched in handling the herd. Instead, she stayed nearby, ready to assist if needed but trusting him to guide the animals safely. The herd moved carefully under Jacob's guidance, Daisy leading them through the canyon with steady steps. Jacob used gentle tugs of the rope and soft verbal commands to keep the cattle together. Naeli watched closely, noting the subtle movements, the quiet understanding between Jacob and Daisy, and the respect he showed for each animal. She realized that this was more than just guiding cattle. It was a lesson in patience, observation, and care. Every action mattered, and every decision affected the safety and well-being of the herd. By late afternoon, the herd had reached a broad valley where the land leveled out. Jacob allowed the cattle to graze freely, ensuring they had water and shade. He checked each animal carefully, satisfied that none had been harmed by the journey through the canyon. Daisy rested beside him, and Jacob took a moment to sit on a rock, enjoying the quiet and the soft golden light of the setting sun. He thought about the past few days, the waterfall, the encounters, the challenges, and the lessons learned. The desert had tested him in ways he had not expected, but it had also rewarded him with understanding and growth. Naeli stepped closer, carefully observing the herd and Jacob's actions. She felt a sense of calm and reassurance, knowing that he had successfully guided the animals through dangerous terrain. She realized that respect and patience were not just important in survival, they were the foundation for trust and understanding between people as well. Slowly, she approached him, her movements careful but confident. Jacob noticed her presence and smiled gently, acknowledging her without words. Their shared experiences had created a bond that went beyond language, built on mutual respect and understanding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple, Jacob and Naeli finally spoke openly. They shared stories of their lives, the lessons learned from the land, and the challenges they had faced. Jacob spoke of his family and his life as a cowboy, and Naeli shared stories of her people and the traditions that had shaped her. Though their worlds were different, they discovered common ground. Values of patience, respect, and courage that transcended the boundaries of culture and upbringing. The evening grew quiet, filled only with the sounds of the desert, the gentle rustle of grass, the distant call of an owl, and the soft murmuring of the stream. Jacob and Naeli sat together reflecting on the days that had brought them to this moment. They realized that the desert, though harsh and unpredictable, had offered them an unexpected gift, a connection that was rare, meaningful, and built on trust. As night fell, Jacob prepared for the final stage of moving the herd. He ensured that Daisy and the cattle were ready for the journey, while Naeli watched from a safe distance. Though she would not accompany him all the way, she felt confident in his abilities and in the respect he had shown for the land and its creatures. The desert had tested both of them, but it had also taught them lessons about courage, patience, and understanding. By dawn, Jacob led the herd to a safe, open plain where they could graze freely and rest. The journey had been challenging, but the cattle were unharmed. Daisy was steady, and Jacob felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He looked around at the vast expanse of the desert, reflecting on the past days. The waterfall, the rock slides, the careful guidance of the herd, and the unexpected friendship he had formed with Naeli. Naeli approached one last time, standing at the edge of the plain. She looked at Jacob and the herd, a quiet smile on her face. "You have done well," she said softly. Jacob nodded in appreciation, understanding that her words carried not just admiration but respect and recognition for the challenges they had faced together. "Thank you," he replied simply, his voice filled with sincerity. As they parted ways, both Jacob and Naeli carried the lessons of the desert with them. Jacob would return to his ranch with the herd safely guided, but he would also carry the memory of Naeli, the courage, wisdom, and quiet strength she had shown. Naeli would return to her village, knowing that the world beyond was not only unpredictable, but capable of respect, understanding, and unexpected kindness. The desert remained quiet and still, the rocks glowing softly under the rising sun. The waterfall, the canyon, and the trails they had traveled were now part of their shared memory, a symbol of trust, courage, and understanding. Though their paths might never cross again, the connection they had formed would remain in their hearts, a reminder that even in the harshest places, moments of kindness, respect, and human connection could flourish. As Jacob rode away with the herd, Daisy trotting steadily under the morning light, he glanced back once, just enough to catch a glimpse of Naeli standing at the edge of the plain. She waved softly, and he nodded in return. Neither needed words. Their shared experiences had spoken volumes, and the desert had given them both a story they would remember forever. By the time the sun was high in the sky, Jacob had led the herd to safety, and Naeli had returned to her village, each carrying the memory of a moment when the world had shown them both courage, patience, and the power of mutual respect. It was a story of survival, understanding, and connection, one that neither would ever forget, and one that reminded them that even in the vast, unforgiving desert, moments of trust and humanity could shine brighter than the harshest sun.